All right, guys. So let's look at this case together, and I'm going to qualify this with don't make this your very first video that you watch on this procedure. Because you'll be disappointed. So this is the patient we're looking at, and again, this is like kind of the more complex things that we do with chairside refinement. So again, don't have this be your first video. If you're not familiar with chairside refinements, go back to some of the other videos or search webinars from uLab chairside refinements, and it'll give you more of a background. But this is a good example of what I call picking up a tooth, meaning that everything else is going pretty well, but there's a tooth that needs to be picked up. Now, if you're looking at these before images, you'll notice some things might stand out to you. I mean, overall, this doesn't seem like too difficult of a case. He was posturing forward here, which you'll see we needed to do some AP correction later. But one of the things that is difficult is these lower premolar rotations. And so, people do a lot of things. Sometimes we'll put partial brackets on there. But when there's not a lot of lingual surface to push from specifically, these become very, very difficult. So I want to walk you through like the progression of this case and kind of how everything went down. So this was the initial setup here. So you can see here, we had some turbos on the upper canines. You can appreciate a little bit more the class 2 that we were working with there. And basically nothing, nothing groundbreaking, but there is kind of a design flaw in the setup a little bit. And I'll show you what that is in this first one. So when we're looking here at that premolar, you can see that pretty much, I mean, we're opening up a little space before it rotates, but we're pretty much just rotating it, on an axis, which is going to be very unpredictable. So the space opens and the space closes. So if I were setting this case up today, I would do it differently with some pivot mechanics, and I'll show you what that looks like and how it works. Okay. So this was the first set of aligners that he wore. All right. So now we're going to fast forward. At the time we didn't wear class 2 elastics in the beginning, so we added them at the second version here. So this is his second set of aligners. This is where his teeth were. You can see that we still need to get some expansion on the lower in addition to bringing that lower jaw forward. And so basically it was set up to class 1 without elastics, so you can expect that the lower teeth are going to be more narrow because if it moves forward it would be the appropriate width, but with him still in class 2 it's not. So we're going to expand a little bit and use the bite jump with the elastics to get that jaw forward. But look at where this lower premolar is. You can see that because it didn't rotate, it actually intruded some, and that's typically what you're going to see. As soon as that tooth doesn't rotate, then it's going to intrude and it'll often come out of that attachment here. The left side worked out a little bit better. So now we set this up here, and the initial setup was to aligner 14 or 15. So you can see here what we're doing. We're leaving some space, and so we're going to actually open up some extra space there, and we're doing more of a pivot mechanic. We're pushing off of the distal and we're moving it back, and that's a really good way to set this up. Now you can see here in our initial setup, we actually, after doing this, we close the space, which is something I no longer do. In the beginning, what I'll do is I'll identify the difficult movements, and I'm going to set up the case only to address those. So I'll actually finish the setup looking something like this, with extra space, mesial distal, and that distal a little bit further out. That way, in the event that I need overcorrection, I haven't already tried to get it back to perfect. I can just keep overcorrecting, and then once it's perfect, then I can close down the space pretty predictably. So from this view, this setup looks like it's ideal, and it should play out great. But here was the mistake that we made, and you can see here, when you look back, look how far down this tooth is. So we are basically working on the bite, so we're extruding that tooth at the same time that we are trying to derotate it, and those two movements do not couple well together. So what happens is as soon as the aligner starts to try to extrude that tooth, it's going to have a tendency to jump off of that attachment. So we like to pair extrusion with lingual crown tip, or pushing up on the tooth. So what we should have done is we should have sequenced this in a way that in the beginning everything else is leveling, and this tooth is, we're only working on the rotation, so we're just pushing it out on the distal and we're pivoting. And then after that rotation was worked out, we would see the patient, and then if everything looked good and we didn't need any more overcorrection, then we would push it up and we would level that tooth. We would push it up, and so we'd have lingual crown tip and we'd push it extrusion at the same time. So that's not what we did. So you can imagine when this patient came back, and here's like some chairside refinements we did. So we pushed a little bit more. We needed more space there. So you can see we added that space. And then the patient, this was the patient's setup after this most recent chairside refinement. So this is where I'm picking it up today. And this is where we picked up this tooth. So this is how it was set up. Now, overall it was tracking. Of course, this tooth wasn't tracking very well, but the case everywhere else, the aligners were seating down well. And it was just this one area. And if you look in his mouth, mouth, this tooth was still rotated and it was still subocclusal plane. And so I want to show you how we pick up a tooth like that, okay? So you have to just imagine that if I'm looking in this patient's mouth, what I'm seeing is a tooth that's derotated, so it still needs to be rotated, so it's rotated the opposite way, and it's sunken down relative to the rest of the occlusal plane, so it's not up high like this like we had it planned. So yes, you could scan for refinement, pick up the tooth exactly that way, but this is how you can pick up a tooth, and again, save a little bit of time on your setups and then also on the efficiency, because we ordered these aligners today. So I'm going to go back to his actual plan. So this is the plan that we did today. And you'll see here that at aligner number 19, it looks different than the other aligner number 19. This is how it actually looked in his mouth, okay? So it was sunken down relative to the rest of the teeth, and it was distal lingual still. We didn't have that correction yet, okay? So what I wanted to do is I wanted to get this new set of aligners that I'm making closer to where the tooth actually was, okay? So I want to basically move the tooth at the stage he's already worn. So he's already worn number 19. You saw what number 19 looked like, right? So this is what number 19 looked like. This is what the aligner looked like. Again, it's fitting everywhere. And when I checked with floss, there was actually not 0.6 millimeters, but there was like probably 0.2 millimeter space there. So we've used enough OCS, and if you don't know what that is, like, virtual OCS, go back and look at the other videos. But we've used enough virtual OCS at this point to get spacing there. So that's not our issue. We have the spacing. All we need now is a distal force, or force pushing facially on the distal of the tooth to pivot that out, okay? And we want the aligner to fit better in that area to make that force predictable. So we adjusted this stage number 19 in order to match what it looked like in the mouth. And this is the chairside refinement that we did today. So you can see here that we are keeping the tooth, we're not extruding the tooth at all. So we're just gonna push that tooth distal facial, okay? So we have 4 aligners here. We're gonna push that distal facial until we have that rotation corrected. And then once we verify that the rotation is corrected, then we'll move it lingual crown tip and extrude it at the same time and close the space, okay? So that's kind of the process of how we're gonna go about this. Just an aside, his upper aligners are done now, so he's not even in aligners in the bottom, so we're just working, and that's one of the beauties of being able to customize everything, is that you can decide, it's not difficult to stop one arch and continue the other one as we're working on specific things. Okay, so how we did this, so how did we get this number 19 to look like number 19? I'm going to show you, because there's a few things that come up if you don't think about that, it just can be a little bit tricky. So again, this is what what it looked like today when he came in. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to edit this, and I'm going to actually just move this. Now I'm on keyframe 19, so I haven't added a keyframe. I'm just changing the final result that it was, but you're going to see it's going to mess with our staging, right? So I'm going to put this tooth back to where it actually was in his mouth, which was somewhere around here, and it was further down, right? So I'm not changing the arch length because I don't have a ton of extra space. Even though it shows I do, in his mouth I don't. So I'm not going to change the arch length. So basically now this is my stage. This is the new stage number 19. Okay, this is I want to start from here. So when I go to number 20, I want to start from here. But you can see how it totally messed up our numbering. So you have 2 options here. So I want the next aligner that he wears to look like this, to fit like this, and that's going to essentially pick up that tooth, right? So instead of sitting on top of the tooth like it actually was in his mouth, you can see that this is going to go down and engage the tooth and engage the attachment, because the attachment is closer to where it is in his mouth. It's probably even more like that. Okay, so this is kind of what the tooth looks like in his mouth now, so we want that to match. But I just screwed up my staging, right? So now we're all the way to 24 stages, and the patient's confused because, wait, I was on number 19, and now if I add a keyframe, I'm going to be at 25. He's like, whoa, did I skip like 5 stages? So that's an option. You can explain that to the patient. Just be like, hey, the numbering's different. I know you're going to finish with number 19, and then you're going to get number 25. All right, so don't worry about it. It's just something with the software. You're going to go from 19 to 25. We're not really skipping that many stages. It's just that's the way that the software numbers. So you can explain it like that, and that's fine. But if you want to actually fix it to where the numbering is correct, I'll show you how to do that. So you go on the velocity tab here, and you're going to hold that control button and just scroll all the way back to the last keyframe. And in this case, I mean, we just want 1 keyframe. So essentially, we can just turn this to whatever we want, like 100. This might crash the software. I've never actually tried this, but let's just turn this to like 5. Okay, so if we do that, all right, it didn't crash, so that's good. So that just basically turns the velocity up to a crazy high amount, right? So now you can see here that we're going from stage 18, the bite jump's still in there, to stage 19, which is where we've picked up that tooth, okay? So now we've successfully, picked up the tooth in essence. So we haven't changed the arch length at all. Again, that's good. We've already worked with our open coil spring to get that ideal. So now we are just picking up the tooth again. So now once we pick up the tooth, well, now we can create the chairside refinement pretty easily. So again, we're not going to, if anything, you can can tip the tooth facially, but you're not going to extrude it at the same time. So we're going to go ahead and tip that distal out. So this is the movement that we should have done before. You can see here again we have a little bit of space. If anything, I want more space on the distal than the mesial, which you can see here. And you can see here that that movement, added 7 keyframes, which we may or may not need 7. We'll see. To me, that seems like a lot, and you can see in the actual one that we did that wasn't as much. You can also, if you want to tip that again, you could tip the root back if you think that that's going to help or be more predictable. Then you have a tipping motion, and you could even intrude it if you wanted to. So I'm going to move it out there, but if you wanted to, you could even intrude it again. You want to keep that tooth engaged until the rotation is out of there. Okay, so let's just say that that's what you decide to do with your chairside refinement. Again, this is way too many stages for a movement like that. We're pushing, which is pretty predictable. So you're going to hold that control button again, go to here, and then you can crank this up to whatever you feel is appropriate. So let's just say we put that on 6 and this on 8, which again is a lot, but we're doing a very specific movement here, right? So we're just basically push, 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 push. Okay, so almost like old school resets, right? So pretty predictable movement. So that's pretty close to what we did in the mouth with the refinement that you'll actually see. Okay, so we just recreated that, and again you can see how long these take. Not very long at all. The hardest part was actually recapturing the tooth, and again this is kind of a more complex thing that you can do with chairside refinements, but it can work out really, really well when you have like one stubborn tooth and the rest of everything else is looking good. So if we go back to our actual one that we ordered today, we can save that, doesn't matter, I'm going to delete it in a minute. If we go back to the actual one that we ordered, you can see that's exactly what we did. So we kept the numbering the same. He was on number 19, and we're going to go ahead and just push that out, and then he'll wear those. I'll see him back. If the rotation is worked out, great. We'll go ahead and extrude it with another chairside refinement and then set him up for debond. Or if we need to push a little bit more, we can add a keyframe and push even a little bit more, but that should be seating on top of the tooth now that we've recaptured it. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to get to those, and hope you guys have an amazing day.